Welcome to Dimensional Shift, where we explore and actively deprogram ourselves, seek the truth of reality through expanding our perceptions, and focus on full remembrance of our true selves. As we begin to connect to our true selves, we will also see the truth of this illusory reality and the way it controls us through our manipulated perceptions. As soon as we fully remember our true selves, we will also see the enemy for what it is and how to rebalance the system by freeing ourselves and assisting others to do the same, creating a domino effect into the evolution of human consciousness. Hey, and welcome back to Dimensional Shift. Today we're talking about the Matrix as a cult. I want to start out by reading an excerpt from the book that I've been working on. This came through in a sudden rush of inspiration in the middle of the night. I sat up for about 5 hours writing a couple nights ago, and a lot of it that came through was quite interesting. So here's the excerpt about the Matrix as a cult. The word occult is an interesting one. The definition is that of secretive practices and mystical arts. Though I've noticed Google Definitions has taken out the, quote, secretive part. But it also has the word cult in it. Secret cult. The Matrix. A cult has several characteristics. And to be clear, I'm not talking about the definition of a cult that's based on its relationship, or lack of, and rejection of a small social and religious group from the larger society. I'm talking about a sociopath-led, gaslighting, hazing group whose purpose is to brainwash and control you for their benefit. Like I said, the Matrix. There's a saying among ex-cult members, no one joins a cult. No one goes into a group thinking they're going to be brainwashed, hazed, blackmailed, gaslit, and programmed to become a recruiter. No one joins a cult. They join a group based on principles or ideals they hold dear and realize later, after those ideals are weaponized against them or they have an experience that so thoroughly insults their spirit that they can't rationalize it away, that they are, in fact, in a cult. Characteristic number 1, a charismatic leader who asserts control over the members through covert, then overt manipulation and brainwashing. At this point, it's anyone's guess as to who the true, quote, charismatic leader here is on Earth. You don't have to go up very far to start running into the puppet masters, though, to find the sociopaths who have no issues preying on people in the Matrix, and so too in the spiritual. These are the different levels of inner circle and cult leaders, some of which are participating in their roles without even knowing what roles they're filling. David Icke talks about this frequently, how the leaders of the system are not the leaders. The true puppet masters are in the shadows, both here in the physical and in the astral. And every puppet master is also a puppet. It goes up and up and up. Agenda stacks on agenda. The emphasis, though, is on the total and absolute control the leader has, and the narcissistic, abusive tactics used to gain that control. This varies from subtle insults and insinuations to overt abuse, fear-mongering, public shaming, and their favorite, gaslighting. Characteristic number 2, an obsession with resources and money. Most of what you have goes to someone else for their personal use or to further the agenda. Many of you hate your jobs. You're overworked and underpaid. Then you add taxes, bills, and, actual living expenses like sustenance. Your indentured servitude doesn't serve you, it serves the elite. But money is just a front. They don't need the money. They have more money than they can spend in 1,000 lifetimes. They want your time, focus, and struggle. Characteristic number 3, the programmed become the programmers. In typical cults, this looks like recruitment of new members. In the Matrix, that looks like people conditioning other people around them, large-scale programs, and the eventual collapse of beings into archons. Characteristic number 4. Questioning, doubt, and dissent are not allowed. If you ask any question that does not align with the message the leader wants, you're immediately blamed, shamed, and gaslit. And if you don't bend to their will, you're kicked out and shunned. Leaving is almost impossible. So going back to idea number 1, where the charismatic leader has absolute control, we can see this in our politics, we can see this in our cultures. This is not a question of do we have it or not, it's just who may be the actual, quote, leader or leaders. Like I said in the excerpt, there's agendas on agendas. There's leader upon leader and inner circle upon inner circle, and it's all meant to control the masses. It's based primarily on programming, which we talk here about a lot. And the way they program you is through manipulation, control, gaslighting, forcing conformity, etc. If you're not familiar with the term gaslighting, that means that whenever you question something, they immediately turn it back on you and make you question your reality. Insults can range from outright verbal abuse to insinuations and almost implanting ideas about you in other people's minds to make them think what they want to about you. These leaders and inner circles would be things within Hollywood, politicians, business, the military, tech, religion. All of these groups are seemingly kept separate, something called compartmentalizing, so that one group doesn't know exactly what the other group is doing. And many of them have their own standard of, quote, ethics, and they have their own hazing processes, and they have their own stakes that people have to submit these things where they could be blackmailed later for. That's very common in Hollywood. And each of those has their own leader, right? The religions have their gurus, the tech has the heads of the companies, the military has all of their structure. And in effect, no one really knows who's in control. That's also compartmentalized. And many of the people who are in control in this realm don't understand that they may be controlled in a different realm, through the astral, into the archons. I think that anyone who is high up enough probably has some kind of actual occult practice where they are performing rituals or whatever to gain the power that they want, and they're answering to someone outside of this realm, but they may not always understand the full agenda of what's actually happening through them. Number 2, an obsession with resources and money. This is the 3D. This is not only the societal construct of money and land and resources like food and water. You have to understand that the reincarnation cycle is also part of this. We are a resource. Our loosh, our time, our attention, our energy, all of that is a resource that they are preying on. And in essence, they are all consumed by this, just as we have become all consumed chasing money and resources. It parallels in a way how the archons are so obsessed with this, the same way that most people on this plane are so obsessed with money and chasing the quote dream and all of that. Unpopular opinion probably, but the archons are within their own matrix cult. It's almost like they are trapped in the astral without being able to expand into the consciousness realm that is beyond that. This is the idea that they don't have their connection to source, so they're trapped in the astral, just as we seem to be trapped in the physical right now. Number 3, an emphasis on recruitment. This is how we condition others through our own conditioning to follow the narrative and to do the things that we want them to do, even if we don't necessarily have bad intentions. This is when the programmed become the programmers. We see this all the time through celebrities and politicians and all the other inner circles that I talked about. Most people who follow a belief system within an inner circle vehemently defend their belief system without questioning whether or not they actually believe what they're saying. They're just regurgitating what they've been programmed with. This is why every time you go to give an opinion about something, it's important to stop and say, is this truly my opinion? Can I give this information in a more factual way and allow the other person to decide without any expectations if they want to accept this information or not? And it goes back to the idea of people don't join a cult. They join a group because of an ideal, say like a politician. People always say, if you want to change the government, run for office. Okay, that's great. Or if maybe they have something they want to be rich and famous, they want to go to Hollywood and be an actor, right? But so many of these people, they run into these gateways of you have to join our inner circles if you want to move up in the system, in the political system and the Hollywood system. And so then they're indoctrinated into the inner circles, which is much heavier and requires paying a hefty price if they want to continue up. Often these people do, because most of the time, again, you don't realize you're joining a higher level of a cult. The indoctrination is so smooth for most people. It's not until they are presented with something that they absolutely cannot go along with that they realize they've gone too far. But by then it's usually too hard to just exit. People who do want to exit at that point generally have unfortunate accidents, things like that. Occasionally people are able to get out, but because they have signed all of these soul and actual contracts, they cannot actually speak out. And if they do, again, they have these unfortunate accidents. But I have seen a few inner circle and cult members be able to get out and go back to a, quote, normal life only because they have not exposed any part of the cult. And that in and of itself extracts a heavy price. Number 4, you do not get to question the leader. You do not get to question the narrative. And if you do, and if you try to leave, you are shunned, you are excommunicated, and often there are severe consequences, like the blackmailing, like the possible attempts on your life, all of that. In this matrix system, questioning reality and what we accept as normal is not generally accepted within society. Going against the narrative gets you labeled, whether that's being made fun of because you're a flat earther, whether that's getting you labeled as mental illness. There's always a label that people will stick on you and use to discredit you. I'm going to go on a quick tangent about mental illness because I think this is really important for a lot of people to understand. I'm going to section mental illness into 3 groups, and that's just my own way of viewing it. This is not medical or anything like that, but let's say you have personality disorders. The exception being narcissists, sociopaths, and psychopaths, because I believe that to a large extent that is more of a spiritual issue than actual personality disorder or mental illness. And a lot of people get labeled with these personality disorders only because they won't follow the narrative. Something like oppositional defiant disorder literally means they won't follow orders. And if you won't follow orders, therefore they're going to give you this label. They're going to put you into these categories. You might be put into like behavioral programs in school, like if you're still in like a K through 12 schooling experience. You will have issues with law enforcement because once they get your name and they have that association that you're not going to follow orders, you're immediately flagged. The second one is something like depression, anxiety, PTSD, CPTSD, any of those. Those are due to trauma. And the primary basis for this is victim shaming. So you've had a really tough, difficult life. Well, it's because you're depressed. It's because your brain chemistry is wrong. Instead of saying your life is shit, what can we do to improve it? Many people do seek therapies, which can help. I am a firm believer in a lot of the cognitive behavioral practices, and I use those in my spiritual practice to help myself. But if the actual issue in their life is not resolved, say an abusive spouse or something like that, the trauma isn't going to go anywhere, no matter how much therapy you do. The last group would be things like schizophrenia, and there's a couple different ways this can go. A lot of people who have experienced too much reality too quickly can't cope, and their mind may become fractured, which also can be part of something like dissociative identity disorder as well. This would fit under there. Their mind can't cope with what they've experienced, whether that's trauma or it's onset of actual experience of more of a true reality than we have here. For example, seeing entities and feeling the spiritual targeting and all of that. So they can't cope with what's going on, and they fracture. Their mind fractures. And this causes them to be very chaotic and disorganized and to make a lot of impulsive decisions that from the outside look crazy. Other people are put under this umbrella to discredit them. So most of us who experience spiritual targeting, most of us who believe in paranormal things, if you say you're a flat earther or you believe in aliens or you've been abducted, anything like that, people are going to label you crazy. And what they generally imagine this is people who can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality, which is the definition for schizophrenia. And it's just not true. It's meant to gaslight you. It's meant to discredit you to anyone else who might be thinking, maybe what they're saying is making sense. That's my side note on mental illness. And it all has to do with ways to get society to shun you and not listen to you. So I don't want to leave this on a really negative note. I wanted to give you some solid tips for you're in a cult. Now what? So number one, you have to accept that you have been led astray. No one joins a cult. It was not your intention for this to happen. Don't blame yourself. None of us incarnated here thinking that we were going to become stuck here, to become entrenched in the system, to be programmed to become recruiters. That was not our intention when we came here. So give yourself some compassion and grace and accept the fact that you have been led astray, but work towards getting back on the right path. Number two, join others who realize they are in a cult and share your experiences. Sharing experiences can validate that you are not imagining these things. The worst thing you can do is be stuck in the echo chamber of your mind, wondering, gaslighting yourself, if what you've seen, experienced, all of that is real or not. Number three, deprogram. You have to actively reject the narrative that they have fed you and all associated emotions and energetic manipulations that come up. Once you know the magic trick, the illusion disappears. Realizing you are in a cult and how cults work will give you your power back. It's one of the most important steps you can take. The last one is recognize that it's a hard process. Be patient with yourself. The longer you've been in the cult, based on your age, because we were born into the cult, but it also has to do with past lives, however long you've been incarnating here. The longer you've been in the cult, the harder it is to remove the programming. Replace the bad stuff with the good stuff. Make new connections with people who are going to support you. Find new behaviors and practices like meditation and energy work that will help you connect to something beyond this matrix system and the astral. Don't blame yourself for slip-ups, like if you go back into behavioral loops that you wish you had left behind, if you go back to relationships that are harmful, don't blame yourself. Just keep working to understand why it happened and to deprogram it. If you found this episode helpful or insightful, please share it with a friend and leave a review or comment. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. I host twice weekly open discussions on the podcast topic on our Discord server. If you'd like to join, head to dimensionalshifter.com/Discord. If you're on Reddit, come join the subreddit r/dimensionalshifters or send me a DM. My username is dimensionalshifter. Keep deprogramming, keep connecting, keep listening to your intuition. This is it. This is what we've been searching for our whole lives. Connection to our true selves.